I want to drill down even more into intergroup interactions and racism, and talk about those that vote against the vote like right in this country, and vote against immigrants, vote against LGBT people, vote against minorities, and kind of examine why they do this. Because I think like it could be one thing to say like, oh, they're listening to Trump just talk about these bad people and then blindly following him. Mm-hmm. But I think that kind of narrative takes away the autonomy of the person.
Totally.
And also takes away the fact that maybe some people voted for Obama 10 years ago. And as well as that, like the number one candidate, I think the number one or number two candidate that Trump supporters would support on the Democratic side would be Bernie Sanders. Mm. So like these Trump supporters also would vote for Bernie Sanders potentially too. So they don't just care about like hurting people, obviously. Mm-hmm. And it takes away their autonomy, it takes away their personal beliefs, takes away their history. Yeah. So like, what kind of analyses can we further do to kind of understand why they vote this way? And I said like you're not quite sure, but like I think it would you say probably ranges from like personality factors to like economic factors to culture factors, or like what can we do to kind of understand why people think this way?
Yeah, I think one thing that we should start with is recognizing that the political coalitions in this society are weird. And so like I don't think there is a single Trump voter, just like I don't think there's a single Harris or Biden voter. I will admit that I was celebrating out in Sacramento when Biden won. And I was surprised by the diversity of people that were celebrating with me, right? So we're big tents.
True.
And I think that's true for the Trump voters as well. So I suspect that there's like some group of Trump voters who probably wouldn't ever vote for a Democrat. And they're motivated by I don't want to take away their agency. I 100% agree with you on that. But there are different motivations that, if you're really bent on a certain idea or attached to a certain idea of how families should be and what gender roles should be, then the Democratic Party might represent to you kind of a loosening of that valuation of family and reproduction and traditional gender roles. And I think that's going to be a really hard sell. But it could be that, people hold lots of different values, and it's hard to decide, like, how do you prioritize how much I care about gender roles, how much I care about my housing, where my food is going to come from tomorrow. So maybe they are movable, but I do suspect that some people are not. And I think that's true in the Democratic Party as well. But I think the notion, and so as somebody who studies like kind of the cultural elements of human social life, there's actually this big debate in our field about the extent to which the fact that we're a cultural creature means that, kind of like you talked about your girlfriend's brother, right? He's still a child. So we have to soak up all of this information from other people, and we can't be very careful analysts of every single piece of information that comes our way. And that's true more than ever, right? It's always been true. Like your brother's just soaking up all of your nephew-ish. That's too much. It's just a lot. He's just soaking up all of this information because as a child, like, that's your job. That's kind of like your full-time job, is becoming a culturally competent member of your society. But us as adults, like, we also are constantly supposed to be updating our beliefs, but there's so much information out there. So some people in my field would say that's kind of the nature of being human, is having all of this cultural information, and what you have to do is kind of figure out which information you trust. And you have to kind of just trust it to some extent blindly, because if you went and like did all the research on every single thing that you were supposed to believe or act on, that would be a full-time job. But as adults, that's not a full-time job. Okay, so then by that argument, we kind of are just going to get some things wrong. We're going to socially learn because it's easier, cheaper, and we're not going to be able to analyze it all. And what we're doing is just figuring out, who do we trust? Okay, we take that information. There's another camp that suggests this seems like a really bad idea. Like, this is a really bad adaptation. Yes, we're a cultural species, but we have to be like more selective about this information, because otherwise people will be duping us left and right. And so humans are actually much better than we give them credit for in terms of figuring out who we can trust, what information seems reliable or not. I think those two, I'm a little bit segregating them as different camps, but I think they have to be reconciled. Like, I think both of these things are true. we are culturally learning because it saves us time, but we can't be so dupable that people are going to take advantage of us. And where those two meet in our psychology, I think, is still under debate. How this relates to how people form their political beliefs, I mean, I recognize it within myself, and I think of myself as a scientist, but it is impossible to verify every single piece of information. So I definitely think that people are discerning who's a trustworthy source and then kind of accepting a lot of things from that source, right? Maybe if they go too far and say something that seems kind of a red flag, doesn't seem to jive with your intuitions, you might put a flag on it and kind of check that, but you're not going to check all of that information. And so I think part of, Trump identity political formation, but also potentially left-wing political identity formation, is figuring out who your sources are, why you trust them, and then adopting a lot of that information. And I think that a couple things have lend themselves to people trusting Trump as a source. And maybe, we can think about like the media ecosystem more generally, because it didn't come out of nowhere. Like they were trusting certain media sources more than others. And I think we have to think about like why people do or don't trust institutions. Right? And inequality might play into that. I think that, I don't know, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but like the amount of lobbying that goes into our system, the amount of political influence, I think it erodes slowly kind of the trust that we have in our political institutions and our civic institutions. I don't think that's the end all be all. Like I said, there are different kinds of voters. And so I think that there are also people who just value, it's silly to think that economics is everything for people. And so we value other kinds of cultural values as well that are meaningful to our lives. But I do think that economics have played a role, not just in terms of people feeling like they can't make a living, but in also eroding our trust in institutions. And so therefore, like whatever the CDC says doesn't matter, they're captured. And actually, there have been critiques of the CDC from lots of different angles, from lots of political angles, for example, in how they managed the COVID crisis. I don't know how we rebuild that trust, but I think we also have to think deeply about us as a society that accepts that people are going to disagree about some scientific questions. Like, what is the best way to deal with a pandemic? It's really difficult. It's an unprecedented, like modern phenomena, and people are going to disagree about what is the best course of action, what is the best policy, and to some extent on the facts of the matter, especially early on. And we have to agree on how to disagree about those things and how to come back to a consensus in a way that doesn't erode trust in our institutions. I don't know how to do that, but I think that's the challenge, right? I mean, I think you're pointing out some things that we could probably agree on would be great, like getting money out of politics and having less lobbying influence, which does nobody any good other than the lobbyists.
It's just called corruption in other countries.
It's exactly. It is corruption in other countries, but here it's okay because it's out in the open.
Exactly. Open secrets, but don't talk about it,
Yeah, and it means that politics is not always for the public good, and it should be, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.